So this is a review for exam 3 that's posted in Blackboard. So we have the first question is find the distance. So the distance formula is the square root of the x variables squared and then the difference of the y variables squared. So x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So I'm going to do 8 minus 5, or you could do 5 minus 8. It doesn't matter, because when you square it, it becomes positive anyways. And then 1 minus 2. So 8 minus 5 gives me 3. 3 squared is 9. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. So I have the square root of 10. And it says round to the nearest tenth, so I'm just going to plug that in my calculator. And I got 3.16. So round it to the nearest tenth, it becomes 3.2. Number 2, we're finding the slope of the line. So the formula for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're subtracting the y coordinates on top, the x is on the bottom. So I'm going to put in negative 9 minus 5 over negative 7 minus negative 7. So I get negative 14 over 0. Well, division by 0 is undefined. So that's the slope of this line is undefined. Next, we're looking at slope using the tangent. So it's the alternate form of slope. And all you have to do is, first of all, make sure your calculator is in degrees and not radians. And I'm just going to put in my calculator tangent of 116.7. And I get negative 1.988. Number 4, find the inclination of the line given the slope. So we're doing the opposite of what we just did for number 3. So this time when I'm plugging stuff in my calculator, I have to hit the inverse tangent. So it's the second function and then the tangent key. And then we put in 2.88. And I got 70.85, and again we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so it's going to round off to 70.9 degrees. Alright, number 5, we want to determine whether the lines that go through these points are parallel or perpendicular. So remember, parallel has the exact same slope. Perpendicular, they're opposite signs, and then they're flipped over. So we just have to find the slope of both of these. So I'm starting with this first one. I'm going to put 3 minus a negative 3 over 8 minus a negative 7. So that would give me 3 plus 3 is 6 over 15. And that reduces. 3 goes into 6 twice. 3 goes into 15 5 times. So my first line has a slope of 2/5. Now for my second line. Negative 4 minus 11 over negative 2 minus negative 8. So I get negative 15 on top and a 6 on the bottom, which reduces to negative 5 over 2. So they're opposite signs and they're flipped over. They're reciprocals of each other. So therefore these lines are perpendicular. Number 6, find the midpoint. So the midpoint is just you add the x coordinates, divide them by 2, and you add the y coordinates and divide it by 2. So I have a negative 6 plus 4 over 2, and 1 plus 5 over 2. Negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2 over 2, which gives me a negative 1. And 1 plus 5 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So negative 1, 3 is the midpoint. Number 7, I want to find the equation of the line that passes through the point 5, negative 1 and has a slope of 8. So if we just write it in y equals mx plus b, plug in what we know, we can solve for b and then write the equation. So the y coordinate is negative 1, the slope is 8, the x coordinate is 5, and we need to figure out what b is. So I get negative 1 equals 40 plus b. Subtract 40 from both sides, we get negative 41 is equal to b. So the equation in y equals mx plus b form is y equals 8x minus 41. They have it all listed in standard form. So remember, in standard form, everything has to be set equal to 0. The x coordinate comes first, and the coefficient of x has to be positive. So because the 8's already positive here, I'm just going to subtract y from both sides, and I get 8x minus y minus 41 is equal to 0. So that would be C. If there was a fraction, we'd have to get rid of the fractions because all the coefficients have to be integers. So let's say my slope was 1/2. I would have to multiply everything by 2 to make sure that all these are just integer values. Right? Number 8, we want to find the slope and the y-intercept of the line. It's not in slope-intercept form. I want it to be in that y equals mx plus b form. So I'm going to solve this for y. First thing I'm going to do is just add 3x to both sides. And I get 5y equals 3x plus 10. And then divide by 5 every single term. And we get y equals 3/5 x plus 2. So the slope is 3/5. And the y-intercept is 2. So when you write it as an ordered pair, it's 0, 2. Number 9, I want to sketch the line. I think I'm just going to put it in y equals mx plus b form first and then go from there. Or you could just plug in 0 for x and 0 for y to do the intercepts. There's lots of different ways to actually pull this apart. But I'm just going to divide everything by negative 2, and I get y equals negative 1/2 x plus 4. Because that negative 8 divided by negative 2 gives me a positive 4. So I'm just going to start with the fact that the y-intercept is 4, and the slope is negative 1/2. So I'm going to go down 1 and over 2. And then I can just connect the dots. Or, if you don't like that, you could have just picked some values for x and then figured out y. So I would pick numbers like 0, 2, 4, just because you're multiplying by negative 1/2. So therefore, when you plug that in, since these are all multiples of 2, you would get y values that are integers. So 0 would give you 4. 2 would give you negative 1/2 times 2 is negative 1 plus 4 is 3. 4 would give us negative 1/2 times 4 is negative 2 plus 4 would give you a positive 2. So you could plot points in that way as well. And then for number 10, again, we want to know if these are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So I want to put them both into slope-intercept form so I can see what their slopes are. So I'm going to move the 4y over, and I'd get 16x plus 2 equals 4y. Divide everything by 4. So I get 4x plus 1/2 is equal to y. Coefficient of the x is always my slope, so it's 4. Here, I'm going to move the 6y over. And I'm just moving it over to the right because it's quicker. You could subtract the 18x and the 9 and then do it that way, but as long as y is by itself, that's fine. And then divide by 6. And I get 3x plus 3/2 is equal to y. So one slope is 4, the other one's 3. They're not parallel because they're not the same. They're not perpendicular because they're not opposite and reciprocal. So this is just a neither.